Freshman GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has officially filed articles of impeachment against Joe Biden, citing his time as VP and alleged abuses of power. Things like the Burisma scandal, where his son served on the board of an energy company, and then Joe Biden got a prosecutor fired who was actively investigating that energy company. Or there's also the scandal with China and Tony Bobulinski. The Bidens have been accused of a lot over a long period of time, and we learned after the election that there's actually an active investigation into his son and brother. Politico wrote an article called Biden Inc., where they said his family's fortunes suspiciously track alongside his career in office. Now, the bigger question is, will this succeed? And the likely answer is no. The House is controlled by the Democrats. The Democrats barely have control of the Senate, so it's likely going to go nowhere. Which brings us to the division of this country. When Donald Trump got elected, immediately Democrats started voting to impeach him, filing to impeach him numerous times. And a lot of people don't know this. They say Donald Trump has been impeached twice now, but there's actually been, I think, 4 or 5 attempts at impeaching him. In 2017, 58 Democrats voted to impeach Donald Trump before he was even really doing anything in office. That's how bad the division is getting. Now we're hearing that AOC ditched Biden's inauguration because she said she doesn't feel safe around Republicans. She's ramping up the rhetoric. The escalation is getting worse. And now we see for a conservative or Republican pollster, Frank Luntz, saying, I don't want to do this anymore. You see, he tried to do a panel discussion with Biden supporters and Trump supporters, and it was just a screaming match. There is no unity in this country. It's not going to happen anytime soon. The Republicans want to impeach Biden because we have numerous stories about his family's corruption. They're not going to let it go. They don't view him as legitimate. Now, for me, I'm wondering, is this really the path we want to go down? The Democrats did the same thing to Donald Trump. They complained about him in much the same way. My personal opinion, having tracked the news, I think they were wrong. And I think Joe Biden is corrupt. But what's the point of filing the articles of impeachment? Is it just a tit for tat to say we're willing to stand up, we're going to do this? If we just keep playing this game, I don't think we're going to actually solve any problems. Look, I mean no disrespect. A lot of people say we must at least try to impeach Joe Biden or at least show that we're willing to go after him. But it's not actually going to work. The Democrats have Congress. Can we focus on some concrete solutions to our problems and start maybe building culture and focusing on the positive? I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't believe, but I can tell you that the escalation is upon us. Most people think this country is headed down the wrong path. 35% of people polled by YouGov believe that the election was totally illegitimate. A third of this country. And we can see some calls now to outright ban Fox News and other conservative channels. This is not us heading down the right direction. I agree with the majority who think we're going down the wrong path. There are people already calling for an Article 5 convention. We must come together for a meeting and then peacefully divorce. I hate to see it. I wouldn't want to see it happen. This country is amazing. The best country ever to exist, in my opinion. I know a lot of people on the left like to cite Scandinavia and a bunch of these other countries. Nah, I don't think so. The United States has done a lot of bad, but they have done so much good. And our form of government was brilliant. Our founding fathers were brilliant. I'd hate to see this country fall apart, but I fear that's where we're going. And those that are calling for an Article 5 convention to peacefully divorce are doing so to prevent violence. It worries me, but we have seen an escalation in censorship targeting leftists as well. I think the establishment machine is going to try to preserve itself. But let's read this story and see exactly what's going on with this impeachment and the division running through this country. But before we get started, head over to timcast.com to become a member and help support my show, my podcast, this channel. There's very real concerns about incoming censorship. Building up timcast.com is going to make sure that if this channel gets banned, we can keep producing content. And if we do get banned, there will be a lot more free content available. For the time being, as a member, you get access to the bonus material. Some of these podcast segments we have are 20 minutes long. In one, me and Ian are yelling about whether or not Donald Trump really is corrupt or the previous administrations were worse and Joe Biden is worse. You got Jack Murphy. He's kind of agreeing with me. You got Luke Rudkowski kind of agreeing with Ian. It's really fun stuff. And when you become a member, you are helping to make sure that we have a safety net. In the event we get censored, we will not be going anywhere. So go to timcast.com, become a member. We've got more coming. If you encounter any issues, email members@timcast.com. We are trying to get through a ton of emails to get you all sorted, but it seriously is the most important thing we can do. Let's not let all of this get shut down by censorship. But don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this if you really do like it. Let's read the news from Fox. They say, Georgia conservative rep Marjorie Taylor Greene Thursday made good on her promise to file articles of impeachment against President Biden. The freshman Republican who has supported QAnon conspiracy theories and criticized the 25,000 National Guard deployed to D.C. to protect the presidential inauguration took to Twitter to make her announcement. Quote, I've just filed articles of impeachment on President Joe Biden. We will see how this goes. Fox News could not reach Republican House leadership to comment on the recent move, but Greene immediately used her announcement to raise money for an Impeach Joe Biden fund. Greene's impeachment filings were not made readily available. But in a press release, she claimed she was basing the impeachment on an alleged abuse of power by Biden from his time as vice president. Greene accused Biden of enabling bribery and blatant nepotism by utilizing his son Hunter Biden's position on the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. Quote, President Joe Biden is unfit to hold the office of the presidency. His pattern of abuse of power as President Obama's vice president is lengthy and disturbing, she wrote in a statement Thursday. President Biden has demonstrated that he will do whatever it takes to bail out his son Hunter and line his family's pocket with cash from corrupt foreign energy companies. Biden has repeatedly denied involving U.S. foreign policy in Kiev with his son's work. And Senate Republicans found no evidence of wrongdoing after completing their own months-long investigation into corruption allegations last year. But let me pause for a second and point out Matt Taibbi, far from a conservative. He wrote a long article explaining that there were several active investigations into Burisma. Many people have noted Hunter Biden had no business serving on the board of this energy company in Ukraine. And while these investigations were going on, over a dozen, Joe Biden flew to Ukraine and told the president, fire the prosecutor or you're not getting a $1 billion loan guarantee from the United States. He didn't have the power to do that. Only Congress can do that. Well, at least that's what the Democrats said when they filed their first impeachment of when they actually impeached Donald Trump the first time, claiming that his threat to withhold money from Ukraine was an abuse of power. Joe Biden did just that. Now, unfortunately for the Republicans here, for Marjorie, the Democrats control Congress. And to be completely honest, it doesn't matter either way. If the Republicans controlled Congress, they would not vote to impeach Joe Biden because the Republicans do not care about the populist right, nor will they support them. They will protect themselves first and foremost. They say Greene's articles of impeachment are not expected to make it very far with a Democrat-controlled House. But Fox News could not reach ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Rep. Jim Jordan, for comment. Greene announced last week, just hours after the House's historic second impeachment of Trump, that she would bring articles of impeachment against Biden. The freshman Republican has already had her Twitter account temporarily suspended for tweeting debunked claims of election and voter fraud in Georgia, though her name was on the same ballot as President Trump's despite his loss. But she took to Twitter Thursday to say the inauguration looked like a one-party military state takeover with 30,000 troops. People were told not to go and flags were planted to show fake support, she claimed. Well, fake support, flags aren't support at all. They just put flags up. But I agree with her criticism of 30,000 troops in D.C. That's freaky and sends a bad sign to the people of this country. We saw the National Guard get put into a parking garage. Talk about disgusting. These men and women didn't need to be there in this ridiculous show of force. And then they were insulted by people on CNN like Cuomo, by Democrats saying they must be vetted. It was absolutely disgusting what happened. Now, look, I don't know if impeachment is a good idea. Marjorie Greene has issued a press release saying today, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced articles of impeachment against President Joe Biden for his corrupt actions involving his quid pro quo in Ukraine and abuse of power by allowing his son Hunter Biden to siphon off cash from America's greatest enemies, Russia and China. There's a story about, I don't know if it was the mayor of Moscow or some official giving money to the Biden family. We saw the same thing with China. It's funny because they say what the Democrats accuse Trump of doing, they do themselves. And you know what? Yeah, seems to be the case. She mentions that Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion of foreign aid if they didn't do his bidding in Ukraine, which, yeah, I find pretty shocking. She got a lot of points here. She says Joe Biden abused the power of the office of vice president, enabling bribery and other high crimes and misdemeanors by allowing his son to influence the domestic policy of a foreign nation and accept various benefits. The evidence of widespread knowledge, corruption, and collusion on behalf of the Biden family with foreign nationals is clear and compelling. Joe Biden was the senior Obama administration official overseeing anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. So this we know this story, and she goes into detail. The gist of the story: Hunter Biden got a job. Joe Biden intervened to protect him. They claim it's fake news. OK, you know, I had on the IRL podcast, we had one guest who's former conservative, now pretty liberal, saying Joe Biden never threatened to withhold the money. It's fake news. And we pulled up the video of Joe Biden saying, I told him you won't get the money unless the prosecutor's fired. We played the video. Yeah. Do your actual research and you would see. My bigger concern here is what this will ultimately lead to. Look at this I got this Wikipedia article, efforts to impeach Donald Trump. They say the first formal impeachment efforts were initiated by two Democratic reps, Al Greene and Brad Sherman, in 2017, the first year of his presidency. Since the Republicans controlled both the House and Senate during 2017 and 2018, the likelihood of impeachment during that period was considered by all to be low. A December 2017 resolution of impeachment failed in the House by a 58 to 364 margin. But mind you, 58 people voted to impeach Trump before he even did anything. It's ridiculous. The Democrats gained control of the House in 2019 and launched multiple investigations. Speaker Nancy Pelosi initially resisted calls for impeachment. In May 2019, Pelosi indicated that Trump's continued actions, which she characterized as obstruction of justice and refusal to honor congressional subpoenas, might make an impeachment inquiry necessary. An increasing number of House Democrats and one Republican were requesting such an inquiry. And then we have Pelosi talking about Trump and Ukraine. I think they're actually glossing over a couple of attempts at impeachment. Yeah, there was more than just the one. They've tried over and over again. Look, we're at this point where the right doesn't see Joe Biden as legitimate. The left never saw Trump as legitimate. Whose fault is that? When Trump got elected, Hillary Clinton and many prominent Democrats claimed he was secretly working for Russia. That was fake news. The Mueller probe found no evidence. It was insane that they were actually trying to assert this. They wasted all of our time. And then they tried impeaching him based on the Ukraine thing, which is also insane. Trump didn't do anything. He had a phone call and said, look, I'm seeing some video go around about Joe Biden. You know, you could look into it. And they're claiming it was a quid pro quo. We do that all the time. Joe Biden did it. It's ridiculous. So Marjorie coming out now saying, OK, well, we're going to impeach Joe Biden for the same thing that you did, actually makes a really good point. I don't know if it's worth doing. I don't know, why it's not going to work. But I think it may be an attempt to show the double standard, that you can raise the same arguments that they made about Trump, about Biden, and they will ignore it. If that's the case, let me tell you, talking about the double standard doesn't do anything. We know there's a double standard. We know the left and the media aren't playing by the rules. So what do? It's all about building culture. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We had Matt Brainerd on the IRL podcast last night. He was talking about registering people to vote and getting people active and involved. And I agreed it's a great thing to do, and you got to do it. And I also added, we also need to build culture, like Daily Wire is doing with making movies, filming vlogs, skateboarding, playing music, inspiring young people and building things. Building culture. You have to do it. That's how you win. Maybe the impeachment will show the double standard, but don't we already know there's a double standard? Won't it kind of just be antagonistic? Far be it from me to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. That's just my 2 cents. I can say, however, that the division in this country is not going to be getting any better anytime soon, especially when you have demagogues like Ocasio-Cortez, who even after the Democrats win, she won't stop. She just wants to keep beating everyone over the head. Republicans are evil, evil people. They're not. Most Republicans in office are just awful. And I think most people just disagree. And we better find a way to come together and unify, even if we don't like it, because the alternative is worse. You know, seeing people say we need a peaceful divorce, I'm like, that's preferable to civil war. And Joe Biden's the one who announced we must end the uncivil war. Was that really the right language? Maybe. People don't want to admit that there's some kind of civil war going on, or a cold civil war, but it's kind of going hot. We're not at the point where there's soldiers from different states fighting soldiers or anything like that. But the culture in this country has been ripped in two. Donald Trump was not making things better, in my opinion. In fact, he was making things worse. Trump took it personally and then fired back. But Trump's an individual and he's allowed to. The media took it personally and fired back, and the division just got worse and worse and worse. Trump has been banned. Trump has been removed, and it's a bad thing. Overall, just a really, really bad thing for freedom of speech and the precedent of being able to hear each other and actually have arguments. But what about AOC? AOC says, I didn't attend Biden's inauguration in part because I don't feel safe around Republicans. That is insane. This woman is losing her mind. And this rhetoric that you can't be near Lauren Boebert because she's armed is nuts. Stop. Look, she's allowed to say it. She's allowed to feel this way. But it's insane that we've come to this point where they have metal detectors at the congressional chamber. We recently had one Republican tried to enter and the metal detector went off and they kicked him out. Lauren Boebert went through, it went off, and she refused to stop or be searched. Why? What is a metal detector going to do? You're going to stop Republican politicians from carrying weapons? They've actually said, Democrats, they're worried Republicans might kill them. Okay. A lot of people don't want to talk about civil war. But, you know, whatever it is we're going through, it's a civil war is not going to look like every civil war you've ever seen. There have been many different internal conflicts in various nations that we would call a civil war, and they're all very different for very different reasons. Today's day and age, it's something like a civil war we're experiencing. I mean, seriously, we just saw people storm the Capitol building. What do you call that? Insurrection? Okay, so what is it when half the country is outraged at what happened in the election? 35% don't view it as legitimate. We are on the verge of shattering. It's gotten so bad that ex-GOP pollster Frank Luntz has just lost it. He says, I don't want to do this anymore after unity-themed focus group goes off the rails. You know what the problem is? I don't think Frank Luntz has any idea what's going on. Now, y'all are you're in good company, okay? Because I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything, but I think I have a better general understanding than, say, Frank Luntz. There's a series of statements that have been made where Frank Luntz just takes the establishment line. You've got fringe Russiagate loons, crazy people who still to this day, Hillary Clinton, Pelosi claiming Trump. I want to know if Trump was on the phone with Putin when the Capitol was stormed. Oh, just shut up. It's insane. Crazy, crazy people. That's the establishment talking point, the mainstream narrative. Then you've got, Q people who are still believing in some secret plan Trump's going to pull off and whatever. It's nonsense. The reality is there's a lot of fake news in the media. And if you only believe the mainstream news, you are misinformed. And there's a lot of fake news in these fringe conspiracy bubbles. And if you don't believe any of the mainstream media, then you're probably misinformed as well. The truth is closer to the middle. It's really hard to break through and figure out what's going on. But I think Frank Luntz encounters this unity-themed session, and he just can't take it. The problem was, because I watched some of the videos, I'm going to say it, and y'all are going to think I'm biased, fine, but the Biden people are misinformed. Or I should say, maybe not misinformed, but less informed. There was one guy says all the Trump supporters are delusional. The Trump supporters brought up very simple points that they wanted sorted out. I've had a lot of people claim that there's a video where multiple ballots are counted several times. And I said, you don't know that. You don't. There's a video from the State Farm Arena in Georgia where you can see a woman put a stack of papers in a machine 3 times. It may be they were counting ballots 3 times. We don't know. People see that video and then they assume it must be this. I stop before we get anywhere near that. I don't know what we saw. Maybe the machine said error, error, and so she put it back in. Maybe this needed to be sussed out in court. Maybe this woman needed to sit down and answer under oath because we're talking about our election and our election integrity. So when you have Trump supporters say, what about this video? I want answers. You can't just say you're crazy. You have to say, well, I think it's probably not as crazy as people think it is. But it is fair to say we must build confidence in our government with these people who don't believe the election was legitimate. How do we do that? By investigating. They didn't. Many of the hearings were just thrown out on process grounds. Now, I have never subscribed to the belief that Donald Trump lost because of fraud. And I've said it over and over again. I've simply said Bill Barr, for instance, pointed out there was fraud. And we better get into court and investigate all of this and take the claims from Trump supporters seriously to respect their wishes on this. Otherwise, you will lose half the country. They didn't. Partly because of the storming of the Capitol. We were going to have many members of Congress object and then present evidence and assert that it never happened. So, the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol get some of that to them. Some of the blame goes to them. But for the most part, that's what many of these Trump supporters were asking for. It's not unreasonable. If you want us to trust the system, and if you think that Trump and other establishment elites and grifters are all lying to these people, then prove they're lying. It didn't happen. So what we get now is Frank Luntz said he was pushed to the brink when he lost control of a focus group. The Zoom session of unity between Biden and Trump voters quickly went off the rails. Quote, "I reached a point where I don't want to do this anymore," the ex-GOP pollster said. Well, he was never that good at it in the first place, if that's the case. You know, I used to actually like the guy. I understand what his job is, and I've seen videos from him in the past where he explains how polling works and he breaks down the manipulation. And then he just went totally tribalist left to where I tweeted at him one day it was the leaked video from Trump, his lawyer's phone call. And I asked, is there a full version? And then he just insulted me and claimed I should remove journalists from my bio. And I'm like, dude, I've had nothing but respect for the guy. And that's what you get. So you know what? Something's wrong in this country. I'm not trying to be antagonistic to anybody. Look, I'll criticize AOC heavily. I criticize Donald Trump way less. But I did criticize Trump, and Trump supporters didn't like me for it. But that's the reality. I was sick of the media narrative that Trump was always wrong and Trump is always bad. And the critics were so unhinged. I had to be like, dude, chill. Trump's got problems. He ain't that bad. But what is it when someone like me, who's considered a milquetoast fence sitter, sends a simple question to a guy like Frank Luntz and he snaps off at me? He wants to come out now and say, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Bro, look in the mirror. You're one of the people you're complaining about. I responded with, dude, why are you so hostile? I just asked a question, bro. Calm down. I'm not fighting you. But that's where we're at. This guy is clearly on one side, and he's clearly angry, just like those in his own video. You know, he likes to present it like he was holding the panel. Nah, he was just another one of these people screaming. Because I'll tell you this, I'd love to do a panel with some Biden supporters and some Trump supporters. And it's really simple. We'll just moderate a conversation. And if people start yelling and talking over each other, you just sit back, crack open a beer and say, as soon as you guys are ready to talk, if you want to keep yelling, you keep yelling and nothing will get done. And you know what we need to do? Pull up the evidence. If a Biden supporter says Trump did this and the Trump supporter denies it, I'll say, hold on, there's a very simple solution. How about we pull up a source? We pull up some news and try and figure out what really happened here. And the inverse. Have a conversation, actually bring people together. He didn't want to do that. Why? Because Frank Luntz, like many others, has already decided the establishment narrative, which is often wrong, is true and correct. And so that's it. He's a participant in the chaos. It's a sad story. It's a sad story, and it only gets worse. When AOC says something like, I don't feel safe around Republicans, and then you see this guy, Anand Giridharadas. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. He is publisher of The Ink, and I believe he is a commentator on MSNBC, and I believe I've seen him on CNN. I could be wrong. He tweets, it's time for this question to be front and center. Should Fox News be allowed to exist? Brain mashing as a business model shouldn't be legal. Okay, then when do we ban you? It's free speech. My response to this was, Dave Chappelle, in his Netflix, I believe it was his Netflix routine, said, the Second Amendment is just in case the first one doesn't work out. Talk about a bold and brilliant statement. Simple, but brilliant. I hope that quote from Dave Chappelle goes down in history. Seriously, we see these great quotes from, say, Thomas Jefferson, and I mean it. Dave Chappelle's a smart guy, and I got mad respect for him. We probably disagree on a lot of things, but that's a quote that we should never forget. The Second Amendment is just in case the first one doesn't work out. Why? The First Amendment isn't just about speech. It's about your right to practice your religion, to speak your mind, the freedom of the press, the freedom to assemble, but also a right to a redress of grievances, that we can say to the government, this is not okay. We demand answers. And when that doesn't work out, there's a Second Amendment for that. Dave Chappelle, not a conservative, but he makes a good point that many on the left don't want to accept. The Second Amendment wasn't just about hunt. In fact, I'm sorry. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting at all. The Second Amendment has everything to do with defending this country from enemies, both foreign and domestic. I've heard a lot of conservatives say that the Second Amendment is about stopping tyrannical government. Well, it is, partly. It's also about defending this country from foreign adversaries. During the revolutionary period afterwards, we knew that if enemies came to this country from outside, we need an armed population to defend it. It's about way more than that. In fact, the original article that was proposed in the Second Amendment was actually a lot longer. And it went into detail about why we should have the right to bear arms, even if you don't want to be in the military or a militia. Now the left says it's about being in a well-regulated militia or hunting or whatever nonsense. Statements like this from Anand are scary. He's saying you shouldn't have the right to speak your mind. You shouldn't have the right to assemble. It's worrying, because what happens when he gets his way? Fox News should be allowed to exist. I think MSNBC is brain mashing. They told everybody Trump was a Russian agent. They ran a segment where they said Trump was potentially a KGB asset. So a Soviet asset since the 80s. Insane. Absolutely insane. He says, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand why you're not allowed to manufacture bucatini that doesn't have a certain threshold of iron in it, but you can broadcast brain-mashing falsehoods and goad people toward terrorism. It's a good question. I would ask it of MSNBC. What about all the things Antifa's been doing? All the defense they got from the left. When you actually had MSNBC point to a burning police station and say it's a mostly peaceful protest. Defending. Providing material support. What is this? No. MSNBC was allowed to say their dumb things, and Fox News is allowed to say their dumb things. But it's the authoritarian leftists who don't get it. He says if the fairness doctrine applying to broadcast was constitutional, why would a new fairness doctrine applying more broadly be a violation of that same constitution? Maybe because the fairness doctrine wasn't, and it should have been challenged? I don't know. He says 12% of Americans supported the insurrection on the Capitol. After the fact, you cannot pin this only on leaders. This has been institutionalized incitement in which the media played a giant role and democracy is endangered by it. Are there huge questions of a slippery slope? Of course. Could this regulation be abused? Of course. These are the hard things we'd have to figure out. But none of that means to me that a business model of incitement and falsehood is absolutely protected. Look in a mirror, my friend. Bring a mirror to Vox.com and BuzzFeed. All they want to do is just beat you over the head and scream. Every time I see a tweet from AOC where she talks about, look, I'm going to be honest with you. AOC is like left-wing Charlie Kirk. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, they're very similar in how they tweet and how they tweet their negative feelings of the other. I don't like it. I don't like that, when Charlie Kirk does it. I don't like when AOC does it. But I'll be honest, Charlie Kirk's not a politician. AOC has substantially more influence in government and in culture than Charlie Kirk does. So if somebody wants to go out and speak their mind and speak their opinions, well, they're allowed to. And that includes AOC. My issue is AOC is helping to legitimize this in government. I think the establishment might come for her at some point. But I'll tell you this. Ultimately, she's allowed to say it. Fox News shouldn't be banned. And the solution to this, honestly, I don't know. I want to show you just some real quick polls on the way out. From the Economist YouGov. On the right track, on the wrong track. 68% say we are on the wrong track. Are you optimistic? 42% pessimistic. 37% optimistic. There's a plurality of pessimism in this country. Are you better off now? Most people, the plurality, say they are better off now. 40%. But when they ask, is the country better or worse? 54%, the majority say we were better off 4 years ago. What is that? 4 years ago was the start of the Donald Trump administration. 54% believe that we were better off before Trump. It's interesting. Party ID. Better off 4 years ago, 68% of Democrats agree, and 41% of Republicans agree. But 46%, the plurality of Republicans, think we're better off now. Even with Joe Biden in the presidency? Would you say that Joe Biden legitimately won the election? 35% say no. 65% say he did. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous. And among party ID, 33% of Republicans believe it was legitimate. 67% believe it's not. Of independent voters, 39% believe it was not legitimate. That's crazy. And among Democrats, 5% of Democrats think Biden didn't win. That's nuts. That's really, really nuts. I don't know what that means in the long run. But if we don't figure out a way to mend this problem, then maybe peaceful divorce will be our last chance. And the people, there's a lot of high profile people already calling for that. That's scary to me. I don't want that. This country's great. But on the left and the right, they're joking about it. And on the left and the right, some are serious about it. And maybe that's where we're headed. Maybe it makes no sense that AOC will dictate policy for someone who lives in West Virginia. It makes no sense that Joe Biden wants to ban guns for people who live in the mountains and there are bears and mountain lions everywhere. How stupid is that? They wanted to ban guns, and some guy on Twitter said, what am I supposed to do when, 30 to 50 feral hogs up on my property? And with the left say, they all started laughing because they had no idea that wild hogs are actually a problem. I have friends in Arizona talk to me about the javelina problem. They don't go around shooting javelina as far as I know, but I had friends that were there at, I believe it was ASU, who were telling me the alarms would go off that javelina, they're little like warthog pig things running around. They had to go inside because they're running around all over the place. Wild animals are a thing, dude. Now you live in a city and maybe there's coyotes and stuff. And maybe you don't want to go around shooting because there's buildings everywhere and you might hit somebody. But you live in the mountains. I'm looking at a mountain right now. When you live in the middle of nowhere and there's dangerous wild animals and you want to protect your family and your property and there's no cops and no animal control, why would Joe Biden be allowed to ban that for somebody in Wyoming? And that's what they're doing. That makes no sense. At the state level, it makes sense. And it still causes problems. Some states don't allow some weapons and so it's hard to travel between states, but that's on you. If New York doesn't want to have certain weapons, okay, well then New York can vote for it. But Joe Biden wants to make a bunch of sweeping changes, and he is. That's negatively impacting people who don't need to live that way. I think we're headed down a dangerous path if this is the way we keep going. And maybe the bigger issue is a bigger focus on states' rights in the sense that different states have different ways of living. Now, don't get me wrong. In terms of civil rights, I like the idea of a federal government enforcing that because my family greatly benefited from it. Civil rights was fantastic, and we won the Civil War. We ended slavery. But what about telling people you can't own weapons? What about telling people you can't, smoke marijuana or whatever? It's recreationally legal in many states now. Why does that make sense? It doesn't. That's infringing on people's rights. Protecting rights is one thing. Taking them away is another. It's a tough question. And it's a hard conversation, but I ultimately don't know if this impeachment will do anything other than just keep inflaming things. So we'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight, 8 p.m. live at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. And I want to float something about you guys. Don't forget to go to timcast.com, become members. But I want to say this. I'm thinking about switching the structure of my channels. I've got two channels, Timcast News and Timcast. Timcast News, I do a segment 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And then I do a 4 p.m. segment here, but they're very, very similar. And I've been thinking to myself, it doesn't really make all that much sense that I have two different channels for something that's kind of the same thing. They used to be very different. It was more, cultural politics and then mainstream politics. And I'm thinking now maybe what I should do is have clips, the segments from Timcast IRL on this channel and then do this 4 p.m. segment on the Timcast News channel. I don't know if ultimately it will work out. It may just make everybody angry and maybe change is bad. I don't know. But let me know what you think. Comment below. There is a post in the community section of this channel where I asked, and maybe I'll do a poll or something. I think most people seem to like the idea because it would streamline everything. Then when you go to Timcast IRL, it's just podcast episodes. You don't got to worry about all the clips. A lot of people prefer that to the clips and have said, I don't like subscribing because I get notifications for things I've already seen. And I'm like, maybe we should move them over. We might do it. I might do it. We're streamlining everything. Timcast.com is taking off. You guys are amazing. And once we get to a certain threshold of membership, we are going to unleash a force. We're going to be free from fears of censorship. We've already got segments coming up for members only that are legit, like going right into this hardcore censorship stuff, talking about things we can't talk about on YouTube, saying names, naming names, swearing. It's a lot of fun. And I'm glad. I should have done it a long time ago, but I'm glad we're doing it now. I'll leave it there. I'll see you all tonight at Timcast IRL. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you then.